CGC Cards Grade School, taking the mystery out of card grading. Today we're going to talk about loupes. Now what the is a loupe? Well, loupe is just a fancy way of saying magnifier. So a loupe is a handheld magnifier that graders use to look at your cards. So there's three key factors we want to keep in mind when looking for a loupe. If you're looking for a loupe to pre-screen your cards before you send them in to us to be graded, you want to use the same type of loupes that we're using. If you use a different type of loupe, your grades could very well be different. And so those three factors we're looking at are 10 power or 10x. We want a triplet lens, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And then we want the lens to be corrected for color and distortion of image. So the first part is the 10 power, 10x, which is pretty simple. As I said before, it's 10 times magnification. That's what our standards are written for. Now we do use different types of magnification, all the way up to stereo microscopes and other types of machines. But if we're grading a card, it's 10x. That's what the standards are written for. If you use a 40 or a 60x, your grades are not going to be the same as ours. So that's very important to remember. You may have different types of loupes, which I have many different types of loupes and different magnifications, but it's 10x is what we're wanting. The second part is the triplet lens. And what that means is the lens itself is made up of three elements. So you have a single lens, which is just that, a single element, a doublet, which is two lens elements fused together, and a triplet is three. Now the idea of having a triplet lens is that that does correct a lot of the distortion that you see in the cheaper loupes, the singles and the doublet lenses. So we use triplet lenses. And then finally, the last thing we look at is that correction for the image distortion and the color correction. So if you use a inexpensive loupe like a single or a double lens, a doublet, you'll notice there's sometimes a yellow halo around the edges of the lens. And then also, if you look through the lens towards the ends or the edges of the lens, the image of the card or whatever you're looking at becomes distorted. And so you want a higher quality lens, that triplet type of lens that has been corrected for not only the color, but the image distortion. Now, one of the big questions I get about loupes, it has to do with lighting. And really, to me, that comes down to preference. I have and use both kinds of loupes with LED lighting and those that don't. And so I've got a few loupes here from my collection. Some basic ones that I'm going to show and talk about. And so we'll start with this first one. So this here is a scale loupe. And what that means is on the bottom side, it's hard to see here, but if you look through the loupe, you'll see that it has a scale. And it's actually a measurement scale. So you can actually measure things such as centering if you so choose through the loupe. But what's cool about this one is it is a LED rechargeable. So it comes on and it has its own light source. What I love about these is if I'm at a show or somewhere else, outside the office grading cards, I've already got a light source right here. And as many of you know that do card shows, lighting is usually terrible at best at shows. So if I'm grading on site at a show, or if I'm just looking for cards on my own, I'm going to have one of my loupes is going to have a light source in it. The second loupe here that I'll talk about is similar to the first, but it does not have its own light source. This one also has the scale on it, and this one is like a camera lens. It actually can be focused. So it's a great loupe. It's a very high quality loupe. There are a lot of people who do use these to grade cards. The only downside is it doesn't have its own light source, and because of the way this is manufactured, which is like a camera lens, you really need a strong light source. So, for instance, with our grading lamp, if you're grading a card, you may want to set the light low so you can get the light into the loupe, or if you're up here. But otherwise, fantastic loupe, and I like the fact that you can focus it. The third type of loupe I have is what many people call a jeweler's loupe. And it's simply a smaller loupe that can actually fold in on itself, has its own little carrying case. This one in particular is a 10 power triplet, and it has LED light ring on it as well, as you can see here. This is probably the one I use, this style I use the most. It's handy, it's small, it's got a light. It's just a great all-around loupe. And then finally, a jeweler's loupe is very similar to the last one, but just no light source. This is about as basic as you can get. Triplet lens. This is a 20 millimeter size lens, I believe. I like to get the largest size of lens possible on a triplet, 10 power. And this is about as big as you're going to get on a jeweler's loop, about 20 millimeter. There are much smaller ones, and they can be make grading a little more difficult. Now, another thing I get asked a lot is price. You know, what do these loops cost? How much do I need to spend on a loop? Is more expensive mean better? It's the three qualities we're looking for. That's the most important. So to find those qualities, you're probably going to be in the $25 to $150 range. And it just depends on how many bells and whistles you want on your loop. And finally, another question that I get a lot is, how do you use a loop? And so I'm going to walk through these different types of loops, show you how I use them, and hopefully you can pick up some tricks and help you to use your loop better. I'm going to take the card in my hand. This card in particular here, I have it by the edges. I'm going to adjust my light source. Now the trick to the loop is you want to start with the loop lens approximately 1 inch from your eye and approximately 1 inch from the item you're looking at. So the item here is a card. Now that distance will vary based on your vision. And so you want to make slight adjustments in and out until the image is very crisp, very sharp through the loop. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the loop about 1 inch or so from my eye, and then the card about 1 inch from the loop, and instantly I can see it's a very clear, sharp image of the card corner. Now you may notice I have both of my eyes open when I'm looking through the loop, and that's really important as well. It's almost like it's human nature when we put a magnifier up to our eye, we close the other eye, thinking that might help focus better, but it actually doesn't. You want to keep both eyes open when you're looking through a loop. And it isn't natural, so it does take a little bit of practice, but once you do it, you'll notice you get a much sharper image, and it's easier to be able to see the card. You're not having to squint one eye. So then when we're talking about these types of loops, these loops are a little bit different. They're a little bit different in the way we handle them. And so we'll take our card. This one actually has this base here with the scale. These are actually made to make contact with the card. And it's a plastic surface that won't mar or damage the card. And there's nothing to catch on the corners. So you just simply place it on the card. And again, you want to bring it to about 1 inch from your eye. And then you don't have to worry about the distance of the lens to the card because the base is touching the card. And the same for our loop with the LED. So I'll go ahead and turn on the LED light. And of course, when we have the LED light, as you might be able to see here in the camera, we don't need an external light source. So we've only seen 4 loops here. There are many other types of examples. Without knowing exactly what you want, it can seem a little daunting to try to figure out what loop to start with, especially if you've never had a loop or you're just getting into cards or just getting into card grading. I would recommend starting out simple. Start out easy. Start out with a jeweler's loop that is not lit or have an LED light inside of it. Just start with the basics, the 10 power, the triplet lens, and learn how to use that, practice with that, look at your cards. Then your next step is you probably will want a loop with an internal light or an LED light. And from there you just experiment to what you like, your personal preferences. You know, for me, the reason why I have so many loops is because I use different loops depending on the situation. But you know, at the end of the day, I just enjoy using a jeweler's loop. It's lightweight, it's easy to use, nice big lens, and it's easy to handle. Submit your cards at cgccards.com and follow us on social media at CGC Cards.